Welcome to the Campus Energy and Sustainability Podcast. In each episode, we talk with leading campus professionals, thought leaders, engineers, and innovators addressing the unique challenges and opportunities facing higher ed and corporate campuses. Our discussions will range from energy conservation and efficiency to planning and finance, from building science to social science, from energy systems to food systems. We hope you're ready to learn, share, and ultimately accelerate your institution towards solutions. I'm your host, Dave Karlsgodt. I'm the Vice President of Infrastructure, Energy, and Sustainability at Brailsford and Dunleavy.
Either you are feeling the effects of global warming and wildfires and other things, or you're feeling the effects of sea level rise due to climate change. In Marin, we're feeling all of it.
Everything that we do in capital projects is very front-facing to the community. We want them to be engaged. It's that very soft side of things that is very rewarding.
In this episode, you'll hear from two leaders from California community colleges, Dr. Jonathan Eldridge, President of the College of Marin, and Serafin Fernandez, Director of Capital Projects at Gavilan College. You'll hear us discuss each institution's approach to climate action from a couple different perspectives. We explore the history of their work, their broad definition of the challenges they face, the unique role community colleges play within the larger higher education ecosystem, and the very tactical connection these institutions have within their communities. I hope you enjoyed this episode recorded in January 2026. Jonathan and Serafin, it's great to have you on the podcast today. I'm excited for this episode. We did an episode last year with the California community colleges called Powering Sustainability Across California Community Colleges. Today, we're going to zero in a little more on climate action. Excited for this discussion because we'll get a couple of great perspectives, university president and a capital projects team. So kind of thinking about the institutional lens as well as the actual kind of down in the weeds work that needs to happen in climate action. We're going to get into all sorts of fun topics today, but just to get us started, can I have each of you just give us a little introduction of yourself, a little bit about your organization, and maybe a little bit of the story of climate action on your campus to date or in your institution to date? Jonathan, why don't we start with you?
Sure, great. Yeah, I'm Jonathan Eldridge. I'm the president at College of Marin in beautiful Marin County, California, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. I've been at the college about 13 years, in the presidency for the last 2. Interestingly, I would say that my first real foray into any sustainability things was back in college when I worked on recycling issues in residence halls. But I also, when I was at Lewis and Clark College as a dean there, was involved in establishing their very first sustainability council, starting to look at things at that point back in the late 90s. And here at College of Marin, there's actually a long history of commitment to issues of sustainability, climate, and otherwise. We have a board policy on environmental responsibility, and it actually takes a very integrated approach, which I appreciate, based off of the United Nations environment programs, Making Peace with Nature, which really looks at not just climate, but also pollution and biodiversity and how those things intersect. And so everything we've been doing has really been looked at through the lens of how those three things come together. So we're not just focusing on one area. We're not just talking about sustainability. We're not just talking about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but we're trying to look at it as a collective whole, understanding that we have the opportunity to be leaders, to be educators, and to make a significant difference as part of a relatively small community. I mean, we are the public higher education in Marin. We have about 7,000 students with us at any given semester. And so we have both opportunities and challenges related to that we can get into. But we've had a long history of working on issues. I think sometimes it's been a bit piecemeal, and that's what we've been working on lately, is to make sure there's some more coherence to that.
Yeah, I know a couple of things I really enjoyed when we had the opportunity to work with you is you brought students into the process. Like we had student interns working on the project with us, so there was always that voice, even though some of the things we were talking about were very much institutional kind of infrastructure type considerations. So that was great to see. Serafin, throwing it to you, give us a little intro and tell us a little bit about your institution.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Serafin Fernandez. I am the Director of Capital Projects at Gavilan College. Gavilan is located about 35 miles south of San Jose, California. We have the main campus in Gilroy, and then we just actually built a new campus in Hollister, California. Gavilan is a small college. We have about 7,000 to 8,000 students enrolled on our campus. Here at GAP, We are in the starting process of developing a climate action plan. So we're at the very beginning stages. As a director in capital projects, I've had the opportunity to work at other colleges in the same role. And so I've had the experience of developing, designing programs, and then implementing them. In our department, we are lucky to be able to work with the sustainability leaders in developing these plans and help carry them out by building the systems. At my last college, we actually completed pretty much the development of the sustainability plan there, including a microgrid on the college. So I've had the opportunity and experience to work with teams to bring these type of projects to fruition. So I'm very excited here at GAV to be able to start the process. Like I said, we're at the very beginning stages of that. It's a process that is being initiated also by a very recent resolution that was passed by our Board of Trustees just last November that focuses on establishing just that a sustainability and climate action plan where it would have our district set goals and priorities that will meet those requests.
Yeah, well, one place I wanted to start with the two of you, just given your different views from community colleges in California. When I do climate action planning work, often one of the first things is how do we get leadership buy-in for the process itself, or how do we know what the goals are going to be? And I find the community colleges in California quite interesting for a couple of reasons. One is there's so many of them and they're so diverse, but it's pretty unique for higher ed generally. Two, you have some fairly robust goals as a system. I mean, some of the system-wide goals are really driving institutions maybe to take a first look at some of these things that it sounds like both of you have had happening in your careers for quite a while. Jonathan, in particular, often it's how do we get the president on board? Well, you're here on this podcast, so I assume you're on board. Your intro obviously made that clear. So maybe from your perspectives, talk a little bit about maybe like what's driving climate action in community colleges in California and maybe how it's different than what might be driving like a UC or another private institution or something similar.
Yeah, I would say that I think there are a variety of factors at play, right? In an ideal situation, you have a board that is committed, that they understand the importance of these issues. I think increasingly in California, that is the case simply because if we have 116 community colleges, but either you are feeling the effects of global warming and wildfires and other things, or you're feeling the effects of sea level rise due to climate change or other things. In Marin, we're feeling all of it. And Marin made the national news recently about flooding. We have also been on the cusp of, North Bay fires. And so we have all of those risks and they keep getting larger as the years go on. So I think from that standpoint, it's just a protectionism approach, if nothing else, may be driving folks' awareness now more than it has in the past. But I would also say, too, that budgets are always tight. And I think that it was seen if you want to wade into issues of sustainability or install geothermal or look at a microgrid, there are these massive premium costs, right? I think that's not the case anymore. I think, and whether you're looking at Cal Green Building Standards, you're looking at a variety of things, there's enough industry standard now that there isn't really that holding you back. In fact, I would say that if you look at a lot of the efforts that can be made, at least with the physical environment for the campuses, if you look at the cost savings over time, given the astronomical utilities costs, particularly in California, there's a pretty good return. So even if you break even, right, and you're then addressing some of these larger issues, that's an easier case to make than we're not going to break even and it's costing us a lot of extra money. So I think we're just at a point where there's increased incentives, but it really comes down to, do you have the leadership that can prioritize it? And part of that prioritization isn't saying this is more important than other things we do, but it's helping people see it in the context of these things affect the way we go about what we do. And so if we want to have these other priorities, if we want to be focused on certain things, how do we look at that initially through the lens of environmental impact mitigation, right? So if we're going to be doing campus development, if we're going to be creating programs, activities, engaged with our communities in various things, how do we start with that perspective? And generally speaking, then there are some pretty easy and often exciting paths to get to larger projects and to get to curricular innovations and other things that actually make a lot of sense and that people can buy into. So I think if you have the leadership at the top that says, let's look at it from that perspective first, then it's a lot easier to have people think innovatively and creatively and get excited about the opportunities.
Yeah, so it's not really a choice. It's a way of approaching the problem in the first place. And I suppose when the problems are staring you right in the face, it's hard to ignore them in ways maybe that wasn't true 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, Seraphin, so for you, it sounds like, your role is more to implement these projects and to probably dream up these projects and get support from these projects. Is that fair? And how would you answer that general question?
Yes, I think that's pretty accurate. But Jonathan mentioned, I think that we live in an area where we don't have much of a choice. We have to take action because of the changes that are taking place in our environment and with global warming and the fires and the flooding. We're all subject to that. It gets worse every year, right? So one is evident to everyone. We are not necessarily in a position where we have to convince someone that these things are happening. They are, right? And they've happened already. So that's one thing. And then the other also is that, our state is, I would say, pretty aggressive at the same time about us implementing some of these into our new buildings, into our facilities. And so the goals are pretty high from the state coming down from the chancellor's office. So they've set goals for us that we need to achieve. So I think those are things that are helping us frame the need to our leadership here. And it's not, I would say, it's not a challenging thing for us. We also happen to have individuals on our board of trustees that see the importance. The effort, the initiative actually was born recently from a board member here at Gavilan College. And she has actually initiated the drive, not only with the board of trustees, but also with the leadership in our faculty, in our students, as well as our administration. So a resolution has been adopted that has really paved the way for us to quickly work on developing a plan that we will be able to execute. So of course, also as Jonathan mentioned, it's not inexpensive, right? It's something that is going to cost money. And so having that support from the board, from the administration, also number one helps us to prioritize the funding that is allocated to these potential projects a lot easier. It also helps us reach out to additional potential support, right? Grants that we can apply for. It's not an uphill battle for us. We have the total support of the administration, the stakeholders here at our college and our community as well to be able to pursue some of these efforts.
So I guess question to both of you though, as much as it's very clear, by being on this podcast and, given your histories and the experiences you've had, that you individually and your institutions generally are on board with action, which is great. At the same time, like as you said, Seraphin, these are not insignificant projects. I think that's what you said. It's expensive to do anything on any college campus for any reason whatsoever, right? Like construction, any even programmatic changes can be really challenging, especially with strained budgets, and just change in general is expensive. How have you navigated that? So, I mean, it sounds like the general support is helpful, but you still have the fundamental resource problem. Any tips or tricks that you can share with your community college brothers and sisters, or am I maybe missing the point?
Well, I'm not sure that this plays out the same in every area, but I know here in Marin County, it is very helpful to have strong partnerships with the county of Marin, with local jurisdictions, with K-12 districts, with other major partners. Obviously, there's both strength in numbers and there's economy of scale. So if we're doing our own thing and three other entities in Marin are doing their own thing, and we're each bidding these things separately, and we're each looking at our small little projects, there's going to be costs associated with that that are different than if we collectively are in communication and talking about, what if we looked at this as a collective whole? Are there things where we can share resources, share planning? Are there ways that we can create a larger umbrella project that we're each a part of? That's easier to do, I think, when you are in a smaller county like this, where we all know each other. I have lunch with a county executive. I mean, there are things that happen, right? So not all circumstances are the same, but I do think that that's important. I mean, these are large, often existential problems. We're trying to do our part. We're required by state law and by the chancellor's office expectations to do certain things within that. But it's hard to do that if you look at yourself as an island and have total responsibility for all facets of that. I also think that the more we communicate and the more we partner with folks and the more we even just learn from each other, the more we will find out about grant programs, rebates, potential opportunities that we didn't think were available, interested parties who might want to invest. Those are all things that can happen much more easily if, again, you're not doing all of that work on your own. And then at the same time, we have the opportunity to connect others and to be of assistance to others as well with education, with interns. We have a lot of students who are very interested in these things. And the more we can get them an internship at Marin Clean Energy or at the county or with other nonprofits that are interested in this, the more likely we are to find some synergy. And every once in a while, a little serendipity is a good thing.
That's great. Seraphin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's very important for us to do things smart. There's been efforts for many, many years. I've worked on several projects throughout the last, I would say, 20 years. Some have worked and some have not. However we're spending the money, whether it's local funds or state funds, we want to make sure that we're showing that we're good stewards of that money. With that said, it's important to do good research and also pay attention to lessons learned, taking a look at what other colleges have done, what has worked for them and what has not, so that today we can make decisions and we work together with everyone to make decisions that are going to prove to be successful, right? Even though we don't have a crystal ball and we can't always predict that something is going to work, but I think that it's very important for us as we're developing these plans that we are researching and taking advantage of opportunities as much as possible and putting together a plan that we can defend. If we're going to do something different than what the way they've done it before, is show and explain why, right? If it didn't, that's where it's important to be aware and to be active and to do as much research as possible from other programs that have been tried at other institutions. As we're carrying out projects in our respective campuses, where can we take advantage of the opportunities to maybe combine or make sure that we implement a certain portion in one project and it's different portion in a different one. We're working on a long-term plan that is going to bring everything together. And we're doing it in a way where we're not, say, wasting money. When we do things that may give the perception, or sometimes it's the reality that we do waste money, right? We lose that credibility, then it's going to be difficult for us to secure funds for these projects. So I think that it's very important that we're cognizant of that. And that's something that we try to do here is that, we do as much research. We're going to either play devil's advocate as much as we can on programs or projects or direction that we're taking to make sure that we come up with a good, sound, and smart plan that we can present, especially when we're presenting for financial support. Whenever there is money available, we're competing with 1,000 other forces for that same money. And so we have to be able to prove that this is going to be the best use of that money. And then with that goes along, of course, the projections of savings in the future. I think it's the way that we go about it. It's very important as well.
I want to ask you a more pointed question on this one, Seraphin, because I know you're thinking about a microgrid on your campus. And can you maybe just talk a little bit about why? Like what's driving that? It sounds like it's not just because you think it's cool. Like there's actual reasons behind it, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Well, we happen to be in an area where we have a lot of power outages, and they're not just by natural forces. Sometimes it's just the way the grid is designed here. We have cars running into power poles that are bringing them down. They will affect our area. So whenever that happens, and it happens often, if we're down for more than 4 hours on our campus, then that's a lot for operations here, both for instruction and operations where. So a microgrid in that sense would help and mitigate some of these disruptions. If we're just up for 8 hours, right? If 8 hours makes a big difference, it will prevent us from having to cancel classes in the type of instances where it's that situation where a car hit a power pole and, PG&E can be out and they will fix it within 8 hours. That's a situation here where it just makes a big difference in the interruption of the business that we do, which is to educate, right? We don't have to cancel classes.
Right. That is your core service, is educating students. And if you can't catch kids students without power, then power is important. So it's not just saving money on demand charges or something esoteric like that. It's like
Yes.
it's core to the mission. Yeah. Jonathan, I guess it'd be fun to hear some of your examples. You teased a few in your intro, but what are some of the projects you've taken on, and what has been the business case behind them? Because I assume it's not just saving polar bears.
Well, I
I'm not
think,
against polar bears for what it's worth. Yeah.
yeah, there's been a number of things that the College of Marin has undertaken over time. And as I said, they've all been great things. They haven't always been coherent, but they have advanced the cause. So we actually have a very robust geothermal program at the college. One of the things we're now talking about is that those systems don't last forever. So what will it look like? Are there more efficient ways to do that now that technology has advanced? What's the lifespan? How do we need to start planning for infrastructure replacement? We have a very robust solar program, but again, not nearly as efficient as now the latest generation is. We have EV chargers that we installed 5 or 6 years ago that have outlived their life. Some of the newer vehicles, they can't even connect to them because of the software changes. So we're updating all of those. We have battery storage on the campus. We were early to the game on that, testing that out, mainly because we're able to store energy so that when PG&E rates go up, we can reduce what we're taking off of the grid, use the storage so that we flatten out our rates. It saves us several $100,000 a year. Our board has been clear that we want to put money back into sustainability projects where available. We're also now looking at microgrids. We're one of 5 institutions in the state with the California Renewable Energy Lab, really doing the research behind what's the feasibility of microgrid work on our campuses. We have 2 campuses, one in Novato, one in Kentfield. At our Novato campus, we're in the process of working out with the county, converting one of our older buildings there into student housing, not just for general student housing, but specifically for fire recruit student housing. So we have a program with Marin Fire where they're looking to diversify the fire service. And so we want to house those students there and have it be housing that's available for seasonal fire workers should there be wildfires in the region, and then build out some equipment areas and things for them as well. But if we're going to be a hub for that type of activity, we've got to have power. We also, our 2 campuses, for the communities they serve, are the primary places that in a natural disaster, whether you're talking about earthquake or flood or wildfire or otherwise, these are places where we would convene the community and provide services. And so it's not just for continuity of service for us, but it's also our ability to serve the community. We are the community's college. And so I think we think about all of those things as we think about the importance of getting to a point where we can look at being able to have a microgrid in place. But it also comes directly out of the work we did with you to identify where are our greenhouse gas emissions located, what's their magnitude, and what will it take to reduce those. We know that we need to electrify our major Olympic-sized pool at our Novato campus. It takes up more natural gas consumption than all of our other operations combined at both campuses. But if we electrify it, we're going to need to offset that with more solar, more battery storage, more other things. So we're also then saying, well, how do we look at that project as part of this other project so that we don't do one and then say, oh, if only we had done these 3 steps differently, it would have saved us money or time or would have created a more efficient system. So we're really trying to think about it holistically, while we also that are doing assessments of all of our facilities and saying, if we have a boiler in our performing arts building that has 15 years of life left, what decisions can we make now with other elements of infrastructure that sets us up so that we aren't just replacing it with an in-kind, either gas-fired or electric, that we're doing things that will make sense and that maybe even are anticipating technology that's not quite there yet. And so those are some of the things that we're looking at now, in addition to some of the things that we've done. And as I said, at the same time, we're really revising our waste reduction strategy. We're looking at issues of biodiversity and the landscape of our campus in ways that we hadn't before, and understanding how these things connect together.
No, it's impressive to hear both of you talk about it, because it's so nice to hear it's not just this project that has to stand on its own bottom, like financially, and that it's really integrated into the entire institutional mission, the complexities of the operations, the impacts to the region, the role you play in the community. I know we actually had a podcast a number of years ago. It's just how I really got to know Cherie, who I know you've both worked with that's at B&D here. And it was an interview with her when she was at Chico State with her president. talking about how the community came together after the campfire in Paradise. So that was kind of opened my eyes to like climate action isn't just putting solar panels on buildings, that it really takes this holistic approach. And what's been interesting for me is seeing the way community colleges react to it versus the UCs or, other large public institutions. They have completely different roles. A lot of the larger institutions I work with, they want to talk about like the future of hydrogen or, the kind of industrial scale stuff. Where at a community college, you're really working with the humans and the actual individual buildings and the systems. And in some ways, I think there's a lot more interesting evolution happening within the community colleges than sometimes can happen at the larger institutions. So I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that, or if maybe that's why you're in community colleges in the first place.
Well, to some extent it is. I mean, I think we have such an impact on the communities we serve. A lot of the students who come to us because they don't have other options. And yet at the same time, I know College of Marin has the highest UC transfer acceptance rate in all of Northern California. It's incredibly meaningful work, and the amount of growth our students have, I think, across all of the systems, colleges is really remarkable. But I also think that, we consider our landscape a learning landscape. So how do we engage students in that process? This includes, a monarch butterfly way station that is thoughtfully integrated in and has connections to other native species. Are there ways that we can propagate certain things that will be of benefit, not just environmentally, but also educationally? How do we engage K-12 students in those conversations, as well as our own students, and engage community partners in that? So there are a lot of things that we can do that I think are different than at the university level. We are not research-based, which doesn't mean we don't conduct research, and we certainly do our research when it comes to implementing projects, as Seraphin has said. But we are a research institutions, right? We're teaching institutions, and we're also community hubs for basic needs, right? Housing assistance, food assistance, transportation issues, which is an environmental issue, as is housing, quite frankly. The more people we can house nearby and change their transportation and have them move between areas differently, the better off we are. And as colleges, a lot of our environmental impact is getting people to and from the educational enterprise. And so we have to pay attention to those things as well in very practical terms. But again, we're integrated into the communities, which is the exciting part for me, is really not looking at ourselves as an island within the community, but how are we part of this larger strategy in Marin to do these things? So as we look at procurement, as we look at projects, as we look at even just op-eds in support of the effort, I think it is a different animal than it is at a large, R1 institution.
Yeah, Seraphin, same question to you, because I know you have plenty of job opportunities, I'm sure, and you chose to be where you are. Why did you choose to be where you are?
I'm really happy to hear Jonathan describe it the way that he does, because I think that from my personal perspective, as in the position that I am, our role is to build it, right? To develop it. And so we look at the technical aspect, we look at the operational aspect, but rarely do we really get involved with the front facing, community facing aspect of it, which is everything that Jonathan just described. The reason that I am here at the community college as opposed to a UC or a university system is because the community colleges are, their perspective is the community, right? We're here to serve the community. And that's personally where I saw my own values, my own vision. And it's very easy for me to align my personal vision with that of the community college, right? So, and that's what I instill in my teams, right? That we're here to support and service the community, the student, the faculty, the staff that are coming to our institution. It's very rewarding to be able to not only deliver the project that, yes, is going to save money, is going to provide the operational need that the building or the facility needs, but it's also going to meet that soft need from the community that is looking for us as an agency to meet sustainable and climate action type of goals. I would say that's where the major differences between community colleges and the university. We have that direct connection, and everything that we do in capital projects is very front facing to the community. And we do a lot of marketing around that as well, because we want them to be engaged. We want them to know that we listen to what they want from the college. It's that very soft side of things that is very rewarding for us to to be a part of.
One question that prompts for me, a big challenge for the large institutions like the UCs and the like is they're trying to track these very kind of lofty goals. And I would imagine the same is true for like the state of California or, a country, et cetera. But at a community college level, you really are having, those direct interactions with the people in your community. How are you, or how do you think you will? I know in case Seraphin, you mentioned you're just kind of at the beginning of the journey. What's a good way to track your progress, and how does it's probably not just numbers on a chart, because that doesn't seem anywhere remotely sufficient to talk about the things you guys are doing, but how should community colleges or how should organizations like yours think about tracking their progress?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we've done just in general, we started to do with new buildings built is post occupancy surveys, all the stakeholders, right? Not only the students and faculty, but also community members. So with this type of project, it's going to be important for us, and this is already being laid out as part of the plan, is engaging those stakeholders in the very beginning through surveys, in collecting that data, not only the technical data that we have amassed here, but also reaching out to the community members, the students, the staff, the faculty through surveys and understanding their perspective, number one, and also their practices, right? So that's the beginning of it. Part of the plan has to include us tracking or going back and doing those surveys, I would say, post completion of the projects. And it's not only say immediately after, but I think we have to include say 1 year later or 2 years later, 3 years, and having that be part of the program so that we can understand the practices. Right? Understand the practices. We'll be recording data and understanding how we're doing and how we're meeting our goals. But I think that staying in touch, in communication with all of our stakeholders throughout and in the future, it has to be part of the plan. So not only will that bring awareness, but also hopefully change the practices, right, in the direction that is going to help us achieve those goals.
Oh, that's great. I know we had Natasha Nikolai on an episode last year, and she was doing work using like AI to collect public data, and she cut her teeth doing work mostly in COVID during California, working for the governor's office. But she made a pretty compelling case for some of what you're talking about, Seraphin. It was like, you really need to understand what's people's actual experiencing through these things, not just, track things. Like in her case, she was giving good examples of things like working in public support, and you might have somebody like a caseworker work with somebody and they check the box, they did the case thing, but did that person actually get the help they actually needed from it? So it's a different way of thinking about it. Jonathan, I imagine you have to have data to even do your job. Like there's no way you can know everything because you're running an entire organization. How do you think about tracking progress?
Well, I think, there's with everything, there's also just the cultural and political aspects as well. And I don't mean politics as in red and blue. I mean politics as in, what resonates with your community. And if there are students who want you to take out a patch of lawn and replace it with native plantings, and that is their priority, and yet the data would suggest that that's going to make virtually no difference in achieving our climate or our environmental impact goals, it may, though, be worth stopping and engaging them in that. If you think of it in terms of how can we leverage this excitement to take that further, and if we do this, can we use it as a concrete or anti-concrete, as it may be, example that is in front of everyone as to the importance of the other things that do make a difference? Because a lot of the work that needs to be done to really make a difference isn't the flashy stuff, it's the hard stuff. How do you get thousands of people to commute differently with less impact, right? In our society, that is a tough one. In an environment where there aren't a lot of places to build or where there are a lot of restrictions on doing so, how do you get people living in places so they don't have to commute at all or can commute differently? Those are big, complicated issues with lots of dollars associated. And they're hard to solve individually for different campuses or institutions. So in my mind, it comes back to the first thing, and we did this thanks in large part to the data you helped us collect, and the students were at the center of this, which was very helpful. Trustees pay attention to students, faculty pay attention to students, the community pays attention to students a lot of times more than they do to the president. But students were involved in doing two things with us. So after they worked as interns and some of the student groups on campus were really invested in also establishing an environmental action committee. It had not been part of our participatory governance. And so now reporting directly into our planning and resource allocation committee, which is the umbrella group for participatory governance, we have an environmental action committee. Their primary charge initially is to develop and then later on to monitor and to promote and make recommendations around an environmental impact mitigation plan. The way in which we structure that plan so that it makes sense in the context of the community and the people who want to see action happen and those who are skeptical of it, whoever it might be. But the way we craft that plan and the way we articulate that plan, the way we talk about it is important. So when we say that we have to use baseline inventory of emissions, waste, and other data to inform the development and implementation of the environmental impact mitigation plan to achieve climate neutrality by 2035, then we say to people, 10 years is not a very long time. We start breaking it down. We start putting it into pieces that are understandable, and we start then talking about the impact of certain strategies versus others. And once we do that and we say, wow, it really is a priority. Transportation accounts for 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions. If we do electrification and some other things, that'll take care of another 30%. Then we start saying, okay, we can't just flip the switch or pay attention only to one, but how do these things start interrelating? What step do we have to take now if we're going to take the other steps that will allow us to see the larger impacts 5, 6, 7 years down the road so that we can actually be measuring progress towards something specific, particular goal. So if you look at that across all of the different facets of your planning, it can become much easier. That also requires that you've got folks who buy into it, understand it, and have the charge to not just track the things and recommend the things or implement the things, but to be able to talk about them in the ways that really resonate with people. And that resonance is what really, I think, drives success of any type of planning, not just around these things, but any strategic plan. If people don't understand it, if they don't buy into it, if they don't feel connected to it, it's just another piece of paper you try to outlast until the next one comes along. But if you understand it, if you're excited about it, and you see a role for yourself in it, you're much more likely to be invested in ensuring that those priorities keep staying near the top of the heap. So those things, that little bit of funding goes here rather than there, so that our time and attention is spent on this rather than some other thing that came along. So that's how I have a tendency to look at this. I didn't really get into the specific data pieces, but I think the data, it's a bunch of numbers unless you can help people make meaning of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. When you started with that example of maybe there's a piece of grass that somebody wants to replace and it makes zero difference on any of the macro metrics you're trying, but it builds trust is what I heard out of that. And it builds community, and only a community can change a community. So that was really great stuff in there.
But it's also important not to get sidetracked by then the next little thing and the next little thing. And suddenly we're busy with all these things that really aren't making a difference. So we also have to find ways to get people into the fold and part of the bigger picture and lined up with where we need to go, rather than focused on seeing that they have an opportunity to ring the bell for their particular issue, which it's not that it's not important, but it may not be where we need to focus at the moment.
Yeah, so you have to take that trust and then do something to scale it up is kind of what I'm hearing. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, Seraphin, there's a lot in Jonathan just said, so I don't know if you just want to react to that. I don't even know if I have a question there, but that was some great stuff.
Like I said, I really like what he's sharing. And as we begin here, I look at some of the challenges that are in front of us to try to achieve some of these things. And so getting some of these committees established and then getting traction going is a challenge. It's not easy, right? Especially for community colleges where our students traditionally turn over every 2 years. 1 year, we may have students that are very gung-ho, very strong leaders in environmental issues, sustainability issues. And just when they get going, right, they graduate. and then we lose them. So I think that's one of the things, when I talk about research, when I talk about looking at how did our peers do it to succeed, those are the things that I'm also looking for, right? Because really understanding your community, understanding your college, understanding your stakeholders, and then again, developing that plan that's going to help that plan actually be sustainable, right? To carry out throughout the years. Because we can come up with a great plan today, and we'll have some students that will be involved in coming up with that plan. But once we start implementing, those particular students that were part of the development may only participate for a month or two, and then they graduate. They're
Right.
gone. And now we have to sell that to someone new, looking at those challenges and learning from past practices and what works and what doesn't, I think is part of the challenge that we have to think about as we start to develop the plans.
Yeah, no, that's been I think, even at the larger institutions, it's still an issue because, it's not just the students that are turning over, it's also the college and university administrators that are turning over. Like it takes a lot to get a group of people centered around a common idea and get them moving on something. So yeah, that's
I would just say that that's a really important point, because I think one of the problems we have had in education is when you have leadership turnover, you lose momentum. And even if you don't go back to square one, you stall or you slow down. And so I think that, these are generational issues that we're trying to tackle, and you can't tackle those within a year or two. If there's turnover and you're starting over, you're just putting yourself further behind. And as we know, we can't get further behind. We have to accelerate tenfold from where we are now to actually get where we want to go collectively. And we're not seeing that happen. I think in California, there are lots of efforts and support to try to move faster, but it's an uphill battle. And so, yeah, I think leadership stability, and that's whether it be at the executive level or throughout the organization with the board, there's something to be said for that, to see something through and to be methodical over time. That is a key piece of seeing these things through.
yeah, and I suppose that's a balance of having a long view that you can articulate and have every student articulate it. If you only have them for 2 years, you'd
Right.
have to make it a pretty
Yeah.
easy message to share,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it also means having enough projects or outcomes that people can see quickly so they can see themselves in the action, I suppose.
And I would say the alternative to that is that the benefit of having policies in place, procedures in place, plans that have been adopted, resolutions that have been passed, is that then when there is transition, those things are embedded in the institution in a way that aren't person-centered, but they're institution value-centered. And I think that is also an important part of all of this. The planning is to ensure that as stewards, we're here for a moment of institutional time. We need to make sure that we're setting things up not just for what comes next for us and the short-term future, but whoever succeeds us is set up well to pick up that baton and move forward without any barriers.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I know we often talk about putting positions into committees, not people into committees for that very reason. So how do you make sure that, when Seraphin gets promoted to the next big job, that the new director can take over the positions that he had, for example, just being silly here. All right. I think maybe we'll wind her down here. As you're thinking about your colleagues out there in higher education generally, or community colleges in California specifically, what advice would you give them as they're starting their journeys? I know, Seraphin, you've said you started your journey. I would argue you've actually been on a journey yourself for quite some time, given your history and some of the projects you've worked on. But maybe I'll start with you. What have you learned even in the early stages of climate action planning or climate action generally?
I would say, number one is be patient. Be patient as you begin on these journeys. Also, very important is to do as much research as possible. I think there's a lot of activity, a lot of projects just in the state of California that have been tried. Again, not all of them have succeeded, but even when we do encounter a project that may be perceived as having failed, is they continue to dig deep, right, in that research as to why did it fail, because we see them, they make the papers, they make the newspapers, and if our president sees that, for example, or one of our trustees sees negative publicity on a particular type of project, they're going to be discouraged from us trying to include it in something that we may want to do. Being very aware, learning as much as possible about the different types of projects, different ways that you can go about achieving your goals. Surrounding yourself with professionals that do this for a business. Their experience, a lot of times, they may bring some of that information that the research that I'm talking about, they may bring it with them. In our positions also, we get a lot of sales calls, right, from different type of industry vendors that try to push things on us, and being careful with that, not jump to any particular sales pitch that may sound great to help you achieve a quick goal, but also being patient and careful with that information. The biggest thing for me that I've learned, and I've learned it the hard way too, right? Is not that I don't consider myself an expert at all. I like to be the dumbest person in the room. And what I mean by that is definitely surrounding myself with individuals that do this for a living, that are experts in it, and learning from them, continue to learn as you develop these plans. You're put in a position, or you're hired for a particular position, to be an advocate, to be a representative of the college. So for me, it's important to know that I know what I'm talking about, and that when I'm presenting to, for example, a board of trustees, that the information that I'm presenting, that I'm comfortable and that I know what I'm presenting, so that the questions that are coming at me, I'm able to respond to them in a smart way that is going to maintain the credibility that I have as director that I am, or the position that I'm in. Just making sure that the substance is there, and don't expect it to just come automatically. We do have to do the work. And I find that for me, it's very attractive to learn and to know about all of these systems out there, these projects, and then being able to develop from that the best thing that will work here at my particular college.
That's great. I like you learning from others' mistakes rather than just learning from your own mistakes. And to Jonathan's earlier point, that's a great way to accelerate. And, and then I heard some authenticity of making sure you're going to your board with really having done your homework and really understanding what it is you're presenting, rather than trying to take a shortcut that somebody might offer you. I think that was great. Great advice there. Jonathan, take us home.
Yeah, I really appreciate what Seraphin had to say there. I might put a couple caveats and a couple little pieces. One being that I think at the leadership level, there does need to be a sense of urgency. So I might say be patiently impatient. I think if leadership has a sense of urgency and continues to put this out as a priority, then it makes it easier for all the folks doing the good work to move that along, and to do so in a thoughtful, methodical, research-based way. And so I would say that, develop a sense of urgency if you don't have it. I would also say that, again, I mentioned this earlier, that students are incredibly powerful in this work. They're very bright. They know more than a lot of us most times when it comes to issues of climate or environmental impact or biodiversity or otherwise. There's a lot to learn there, but we also have an opportunity to really give them a chance to learn. Those interns that we hired when we were working with you to develop our baseline data, they now have a stronger resume. They now have networks, right? They now have folks who can be references for them. They have things that they learned specifically on the way these systems work. So there's an opportunity there as well to look at it not just as these are things we need to do, but how does it become part of the educational enterprise? I would say also that I'm a firm believer that we need to start with what is at the core of our values. So everything we do when we go through planning, it's based in equity and in environmental impact mitigation. We think about historical and systemic disparities and how we put resources to address those disparities. That's what equity work is. We think about the way in which we have an impact on the environment and how we can reduce and limit that across a whole series of it. So if we start there, then we don't develop the next iteration of the facilities plan or the landscape plan or the technology plan or all the other plans until we're clear on what we're doing and where we want to improve in these other areas. And if we are, then everything that we're doing moving forward is focusing on reducing environmental impact and being more equitable in the way we do our work. So I think that's the starting point, is being clear on those things and having those values really drive the work. And I would say that our equity work drives our environmental work. The communities in Marin that are the most under-resourced are the ones most vulnerable to sea level rise and other things. They're the ones that have the most difficult time getting to and from our campuses and are probably expending more environmentally insensitive resources to do that. So we have to understand how these things are tied together. And I think that's also part of leadership, is helping people see the global piece of that. The only other caveat I would say is, yeah, we get a lot of vendors and a lot of folks selling a lot of things. On the other hand, if you do your homework and you find the right vendor to do the right thing, it can really accelerate progress. And, I will say, and this isn't to play to the audience here, but Brailsford and Dunleavy was hugely helpful to us in getting that baseline data together. Because for years, we were feeling really good about all the things we were doing, the geothermal and the solar panels, all of the things. And yet we looked around and said, we really don't have any idea. Is this making a difference? How hard will it be to actually get to climate neutrality? We don't know. And the data you helped us provide that we could not have done on our own, or if we had, it would have taken us years, allowed us to almost, within a few months, we were able to see, where do we need to start prioritizing our efforts? And to some extent, there were some known areas, but there were some surprises too. And that was incredibly helpful. It also energized our efforts. So all the things we're doing now, we can trace back to the importance of having, a vendor, a partner that you can trust in that work at different points in time. That's also where I think collectively we can help each other. Seraphin knows who he would be willing to recommend and who he wouldn't. I, feel the same way in a variety of ways. But I think that's an important piece as well, that and again, it goes back to, we can't do this all on our own. If we recognize that, it shouldn't lead to paralysis and say, well, if we can't do it on our own, what are we going to do? It should be exciting to say, this really gives us an opportunity to expand our reach. All these partnerships we're developing to help us accomplish these things, they're additional opportunities to tell the story of the college, to meet alumni who are working in those organizations, who are excited to be reconnected to the college, who want to give back in different ways. So, there's a multiplier effect beyond the environmental work if you approach it in certain ways.
No, well, I appreciate the kind words. And one of the things I would throw back to the colleges and universities listening to this is, it was great. It's great working both with you, because you were willing to hear the advice in its raw form. You wanted to see the data, and you didn't want us to tell us what you wanted to hear. You wanted to hear what the real data was. And that's a huge difference. And I think that allows you to have a great institution partnership with a vendor that's authentic, and that's like chasing the right mission goal, as opposed to just trying to sell a bill of goods. So I really appreciate that. Any last words or ways people can get in touch with you? I know you both have great websites, and I'm sure would field questions for your colleagues.
I would be happy to speak with anyone. And, my email address, jeldridge@marin.edu, probably the best way to get in touch with me initially, and then happy to set up whatever works.
That's great. And Seraphin?
Yeah, same. Likewise here. Happy to assist with any questions or any support anybody wants. My email address is sfernandez@gavilan.edu.
That's great. And we'll put that in the show notes and make sure people have a way of getting in touch with you. I just want to thank both of you for taking the time. And we, had a loose outline of what we were going to talk about today, but we went through all sorts of great things. And I expected something really good, but it was even deeper and more inspiring than I imagined. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
That's it for this episode. This podcast is proudly produced by Brailsford and Dunleavy. This episode was produced by Allison Bruns. A huge thanks to our sound editor, Kristen Crawford. Our theme music, Under the Radar, comes courtesy of Dallas-based musician and arranger Geo Washington Wright and his Studio Big Band. If you haven't already, be sure to follow Campus Energy and Sustainability Podcast on LinkedIn or Blue Sky. You can do a deeper dive on past episodes at campusenergypodcast.com. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a quick rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. It's a great way to get the word out about the show. As always, thanks for listening.